Hunter x Hunter has one of the most complex cast of characters around, but that also means a wide range of abilities and levels available to them. With so many types of nen, it would be hard to talk about everyone, but we can at least consider who the best Transmuters are. We'll be looking into some fan favorites like Killua and Netero's very own student Biscuit. We'll be judging the users based on their power, speed, proficiency, as well as talent and experience. And as a bonus, we'll use Togashi's own chart of the most proficient users as a guide. Let's dive in. Number 10, Sadaso. Sadaso is a transmuter from the Heavens Arena who came across Gon and Killua on the 200th floor. Though he's missing his real arm due to an unlucky nen initiation, he can create a larger one made of aura that he uses to restrain and render his enemies unconscious. But we don't get to see him fight much because he gets scared by Killua's assassin abilities and bails on the match he was meant to have. Number 9, Worm. Before we get into what this shadow beast can do, let's take a moment to recap what transmutation involves. For one, the user's nen can change shape, replicate elements, or even take on the appearance of animals and objects. And like other techniques, Transmuters' creations cannot be seen by someone who doesn't know about nen. Now for our friend Worm. As a shadow beast working for the 10 Dawns, he had to have been a decently powerful and reliable transmuter. However, his ability, which involves going underground and dragging his opponents with him, relied heavily on the help of his fellow beasts. Alone, he was at least durable enough to survive Uvajin's Fist of Destruction long enough to call for help, but he still died, so what else can we say? Okay, there is the fact that he managed to make Uvajin, one of the strongest members of the Phantom Troop, get blown back with a punch. But he also did break his fingers in the process. Rip Mr. Worm. But let's move on to his colleague now. Number 8, Porcupine. This fellow shadow beast had the ability to control each of his hairs, using them for defense and also to deflect things like bullets. In other words, any physical projectile within reason could be safely stopped before making any damage. On the other hand, anything that wasn't as palpable, be it Uvajin's loud scream or maybe even electricity like Killua uses, would easily get through his thousands of needles. Another way he could use his hairs is by attacking with them, using them as piercing needles. But he could turn them soft at will, as seen when he protected his fellow shadow beast from his attack. Considering he's a transmuter, he likely used his abilities to change the properties of his hair to match that of a porcupine's quills, thus his nickname. At the same time, seeing as enhancement is next to transmutation, we can guess that he used it to strengthen his controlled body hair. Porcupine's nen abilities were interesting, but mostly worked as defense for himself and not much else. He also had to rely on his teammates to finish off his enemies. But before we get into the stronger users, don't forget to subscribe with notifications on and smash that like button for more top 10s like this. Number 7, Machi Komachine. Our first troop member on the list is Machi, the group's number 3 spider and 6th in terms of physical strength. As a resident of Meteor City, it's clear that her nen threads created through transmutation are nothing to mess with. Not only can she use them to restrain people, hang them, or slice and dice through flesh, but she can use them to repair severed limbs and fix up serious injuries with her skillful stitching. We saw this most notably after Hisoka's match against Castro left him with 2 arms to be reattached. One of the downsides is that the distance between her and her target lowers the strength of her threads proportionally. So she could theoretically catch someone from a far distance, but the thread itself wouldn't be durable enough to hold them for long. But even without her transmutation abilities, Machi remains a threat to most nen users. And that's because of a few things. She has a lot of experience from working with the troop. She's also considered on par with Hisoka, as stated by Killua when he tried to explain her and Nobunaga's levels of expertise. And not to mention, she has senses that go beyond normal humans. By that, I mean she tends to use her intuition to figure things out, without even needing to rely on evidence. One of the best examples of this is when she felt that Gon and Killua were somehow connected to Kurapika, despite Pakunoda's ability not picking up on it. And if that isn't enough, Machi functions more as a stealth master within the troop, having so much agility and speed that people like Gon weren't able to react before she caught him. That aside, heavy damage doesn't stop her for long, since she can use her stitches to both repair and possibly enhance her healing abilities. But the character above her is someone who could cause a lot of damage with minimal effort from his years of ninja training. Number 6, Hanzo the Shinobi. Staying with the shinobi theme, Hanzo is likely a slight cut above Machi. Not only did he learn nen in 6 months, but he already had a kind of feel for it because of his extremely difficult ninja training. He trained for 18 years, and possibly more given the current time frame. That's his entire life, by the way. Being a master of the Cloud Hidden style, or Kumogaku Ryu, of ninjutsu, it's hard to argue against his abilities and expertise in what he does. He's even often seen as an older version of Killua by fans, considering their childhoods and assassin-like techniques. If that isn't enough, he's a master torturer without needing weapons. Even Killua admits Hanzo would have made Gon give up if he had pushed further. He was basically going easy on him. One thing that knocks him down a notch is the fact that he wasn't involved in the Chimera Ant arc, so we don't get a sense of how he'd do against those powerful creatures. That aside, he did return for the current arc, the Succession Contest, and displayed his Hanzo Skill 4, Art of the Doppelganger. It involves making an astral projection of himself that can fight and kill while his body stays elsewhere. It requires him to use a mix of conjuration and manipulation, and I'd argue that emission is involved too, seeing as it can go through walls, but can also become tangible enough to attack people directly. The downside of the technique is it requires a lot of focus, and if Hanzo's real body is disrupted, the projection disappears. On the other hand, since it's called number 4, that implies there are 3 other techniques that we haven't seen him use, some of which likely involve his transmutation skills more heavily. Regardless, seeing as he is placed midway between Transmuter and Conjurer, it should come as no surprise that he's become proficient in a technique as complicated as projecting his consciousness, and using it for both stealth and combat. But because we didn't see the rest of his skills, nor how he'd fare against the Chimera Ants, this is his spot. Number 5. Killua Zoldyck. It comes as no surprise that someone younger and more talented surpassed a fellow stealth type, does it? Though Hanzo is extremely skilled at what he does, it took him much longer to reach that point. Killua, on the other hand, he got his hunter license as a preteen and got rid of all the other competitors in one fell swoop. But let's backtrack a bit. Killua was trained from a young age to be an assassin, and this included stalking prey while risking his life. His family considers him the most talented in their history, which is crazy considering who he's related to. Silva, Zeno, Illumi, all powerhouses. He's beyond naturally talented and learns everything quickly and with enough ease to put older Nen users to shame. Killua was also considered to have possibly limitless potential, like it was said of Gon, and is considered a 1 in 10 million talent as well. But there's more. Killua is good with most weapons, but chooses to use 50-kilogram yo-yos, meaning each one weighs more than him. He could even take down a unit of fighters with tanks among them. But that's not all. Killua can turn his nails into claws for his assassination techniques, and is practically immune to poison, while also able to withstand ungodly amounts of electricity because of his lifelong training. He's also an incredible tactician who's able to read opponents' levels and avoid fighting people above him. Though that sometimes backfired due to Illumi's needle in his head, which made him flee opponents who were actually below his level. With time, Killua could open the 64-ton gate of his family's property, and is even able to avoid attacks while asleep. What can't he do? You remember those nails I mentioned? Well, Killua can use them to decapitate humans, pull out hearts, and even pierce Chimera Ants, who have stronger outer bodies called exoskeletons. But on the defensive side, Killua doesn't lag behind either. He uses extreme speed within a technique called Godspeed, allowing him to run 40 kilometers in 10 minutes, and that's on uneven ground with obstacles. Early on, Killua figured out how to change his Nen properties to be like electricity, while modifying the intensity based on who's touching him. Sadly, it also requires him being charged up like a machine to use it as attacks, and even then, it's not potent enough to kill, just paralyze or stun his opponents. But seeing as this prodigy could still grow endlessly, we can't put him as high as some older and more vicious entries on the list. Number 4. Phaeton Porter. There seems to be an assassin theme within the Transmuter group. I wonder why. Anyhow, Phaeton is the number 2 spider, and number 5 in terms of physical strength among the troop members. Just like the others, he's a Meteor City resident, but he seems to have a secret language that certainly sets him apart. Being the torture specialist of the troop, it goes without saying that getting on his bad side guarantees an awful day. Phaeton is a sword user, though it's usually hidden inside an umbrella, and he can also shoot with the same weapon. He has an extremely fast reaction speed, quick enough to catch Gon, but also to avoid getting his ears blown out when Uvajin screamed at the Shadow Beast to kill him. Oh, and he also jumped out of a car to avoid being caught in Fun Fun Cloth, but so did his fellow troop members. As for what he can do with his Nen, Phaeton's Pain Packer armor points to conjuration rather than transmutation, considering he wears it to protect him from heat and other elements. And he can expel his aura like an emitter, which indicates him having the skill to use 3 types at once, and that's certainly no easy feat. But his quiet and calculated way of seeing situations likely helps him to achieve these levels of proficiency. The ultimate technique we've seen Phaeton use, called Rising Sun, is powerful enough to kill whoever is in the vicinity, including allies, since it doesn't discriminate. For this, Phaeton transmutes his Nen into unfathomable high heat that is directly linked to how much damage and pain he received beforehand. The more he's injured, the hotter the sun emitted is, and the longer it lasts while scorching the skin off his victims. One problem is that he's quick to anger and even quicker to attack, which might cause problems for him if he faces someone who knows him and likes pushing buttons and playing games. You know, like that clown that pretended to be a troop member for a while? Yeah. Not to mention that Phaeton purposely doesn't start a fight using his full power, likely to increase the effectiveness of his Rising Sun or whatever other abilities he has up his sleeve. Or maybe just to enjoy it longer. On that note, because we haven't seen all of Phaeton's techniques, he could be ranked much higher in the future when we learn more about his limitations and anything that can stem from his Pain Packer. From here on out, we dive into the best of the Transmuters, 2 of whom unintentionally caused their downfall. Number 3. Menthuta Yuppie. According to Togashi's Nen proficiency chart, this Chimera Ant Royal Guard is considered a natural level transmuter. This means that given more time, he might have reached the peak of his Nen abilities, since he was one step below Extreme. Yuppie was the youngest of the 3 Ant Guards, though Colt believed he could defeat Netero with his skills. This likely would not have been true, since Netero easily stopped Pido and Meruem was defeated by his poor man's Rose. Oh, and the same poison eventually killed Yuppie as well. According to Yuppie, the extermination team didn't even have 1/10 of his power. And it would be hard to argue against that, considering how he left Shoot, Knuckle, and even Morel and Killua basically in the dust. He originally relied on general shapeshifting, but after evolving, he could change more specific parts as he liked, including having his arms become blades to fight with, grow multiple arms and eyes, sprout wings, protrude spikes to cause more damage, etc. At that point, he was powerful enough to smash down entire towers and fast enough to speed around looking like a centaur hybrid with no one able to catch him. Those body modifications could either be due solely to his ant physiology or partially related to his transmutation abilities. After Netero's explosion, Yuppie walked into the heat left over from the poor man's Rose and seemed barely fazed by it, despite how scorching it had to be. Even Poof was wary of getting close to it. Seeing as he could modify his body in ways to prevent certain things, like adding eyes to cover his blind spots, it would make sense if he could strengthen his skin enough to withstand the heat, even if just for a bit. More specifically, Yuppie's main Nen attack was a Blast of Rage, an emission technique that created an explosion after his body filled with uncontrollable anger and the need to unleash it. Yuppie returns to his regular form afterwards. His Centaur is the evolved form of his anger burst, with only his arm swelling up instead. This successfully solved the weakness with the previous version, which left his body open to attacks during the time it was growing in size, especially since his Centaur body also creates a long blade on his other arm. Unfortunately, due to his high level of loyalty, Yuppie gave up most of his cells to help revive Meruem when he was almost completely destroyed by Netero. Yes, the loyalty was nice, but it was a mistake for both of them to rely solely on Pido to protect the king. They were already dead. This might have been an instance of his childish mindset as the youngest, besides being quick to anger and blowing up. Literally. His lack of experience may have been part of why it was so easy for him to lose his cool, and made it easier for people like Killua to get the drop on him. Had he not given up his cells to Meruem, would he have progressed further? The story seems to point to yes, but that didn't come to pass. If he had last resort techniques like our next entry, maybe he would have gotten farther in life. But it's probably for the best that he didn't. Number 2, Hisoka Maro. Another natural level transmuter is our creepy and colorful magician. We can assume that this is where he stood prior to surviving death through his ability at least. As we all know, Hisoka was a fake troop member, but ranked 3rd in physical strength anyway. This says something when he was with the likes of Uvajin and Finks. Interestingly, Hisoka is nicknamed Magician and Grim Reaper. Both describe him perfectly as a character since he loves to play mind games, but also to take down powerful opponents that he feels have reached their peak. Hisoka tends to kill for sport, with an obvious example being how he failed the first time he tried to get his hunter license for attempting to kill an examiner. Now we all know the joke, bungee gum has the properties of rubber and gum, which means Hisoka transmuted his aura to combine those two things and make them many times stronger than the materials found in the world. He's playful, cunning, but also ruthless, and bungee gum reflects that. But what does he do with it? Well, he can draw people towards him, connect it to items, walk on walls, probably ceilings too, by putting it on the soles of his feet, and send things away from himself to avoid damage. This was shown during the dodgeball match against Razor, but also his fight with Goto and his super fast coins. Besides Hisoka's rubbery gum, he also has Texture Surprise, which comes in handy to hide wounds and reattaches limbs that were blown off. And of course to infiltrate groups like the Troop by making a fake tattoo, or to create images such as maps to mislead people. This is more so a conjuration skill, and can be seen by non-Nen users as well to fool them. Nonetheless, the implications of this, along with his bloodlust and killer skills, make him a very dangerous Nen user. But let's check out his other crazy abilities. We know he loves using playing cards to kill and slice throats. But he can also sense things most people can't, like Kaluto, who is using perfect Zetsu to hide himself. If the Troop says your Zetsu is impeccable, we should probably agree. Not to mention, Nobunaga acknowledges Hisoka's ability to see through it as being abnormal. Interestingly, Hisoka can also see further distances by using his fingers to look through, as if using binoculars. Whether this is through Nen or just because he focuses his eyes more is unclear, but it's impressive anyway. In case you forgot, Hisoka was a floor master for Heaven's Arena, a feat in itself, but also forced Killua and Gon to learn more about Nen to even get past him. Illumi said he was worried about crossing his path early on in the story, and that specific Zoldyck is considered above some of the Zodiacs according to Hisoka. There's a lot of mutual respect between them clearly. That's not where Hisoka's accomplishments as a Nen user end though. He killed 2 troop members in a short period of time, Shalnark and Kortopi, and easily could have taken down Machi if he'd wanted to. It feels like the only reason he didn't was so she could tell the troop about what he did and make the chase more challenging. Our resident clown has a good sense of people's talent, and as such will spare those who could still grow stronger to continue his game of cat and mouse. The downside to this is he plays around too much, willing to let his opponent choose the time, place, and situation in order to make the fight more interesting, even wanting to face multiple people and their allies if it means a better battle. Also, his high pain tolerance makes him realize too late when something serious has happened to him, and he can get fairly seriously injured from that. That aside, using bungee gum, Hisoka escaped death by restarting his heart and lungs. This means he likely evolved his Nen abilities now, but we have yet to see where it will take him, so this is going to be his spot until we get more info. And before we get to the top spot, keep in mind that Silva and Xenozoldyck have been revealed as emitter types and are no longer transmuters as we once thought. This means... Number 1. Biscuit Kruger. You betcha! She's one of the strongest women in the series, and certainly more powerful than a large chunk of the Nen users we've met. It's the one and only Bisky. When we first meet her, there's already a sense that she's hiding a deep power and that Gon and Killua were dismissing her too quickly. Not to mention that Killua was surprised she could keep up with them. That not only demonstrated his lack of experience, but how good she was at concealing her true self. Bisky is an extreme level transmuter. Yes, she's that high up, which means she's proficient in other categories. This explains how she's able to teach so efficiently, seeing as she's skilled in enhancement, emission, and manipulation. Now that's not to say she's at 100% in each, but she's definitely skilled enough if she can teach people who aren't transmuters. That aside, Bisky is a double-star stone hunter who learned Shingen Ryu, the martial arts that Netero created. And then she became Wing's master, who himself is also a teacher now. Crazy how that works, right? She started learning Nen at 17, and was also an examiner for the Hunter exam for a time, after passing it herself. Due to her ease at using Nen types, she invented ways to practice and strengthen most of them, with us seeing this in action during the Greed Island arc where she helped Gon and Killua improve. And she taught them again during the Chimera Ant arc. In many ways, they probably wouldn't have come that far without teachers like her and others who use Shingen Ryu, like Netero and Wing. Bisky mostly uses her smaller, younger form to subdue people, because if she uses her original form, then her power is difficult to control. She hides this true form because she finds it ugly, but also warns people that if she unleashes it, it can kill them. She has no idea where her smaller form came from, but she admits she wished for the changes, and over the years it was granted to her. This sounds like something that would involve a lot of proficiency in Nen, and maybe a little something extra. Could this be a hint at Bisky being close to becoming a specialist in the future? That aside, she can stay alert even while asleep, just as Killua can, due to his assassination teachings. And Bisky has the stamina to run for hours without breaking a sweat or being winded. She also moved fast enough to avoid any damage during the dodgeball match, whereas everyone else, even Hisoka, got injured by Razor and his skills. And she wasn't even in her true form at the time. This brings up the fact that Bisky has not shown her full power yet, and has only needed to use a combination of her normal abilities to take down or intimidate opponents. The one time we saw her fight using her real body, the fight was instantly done, so there was nothing to measure really. Even without that information though, she's very experienced and respected among the hunting community, which makes sense since she's in her 50s now, despite usually looking like a young girl. If she ever needs to relax, she can also use Cookie, her masseuse, for alleviating fatigue and offering healing for pain. It also helps keep her young and her organs healthy, which explains how she can be so powerful at her age. Similarly, she can also use piano massage on other people to relieve them, offering a night's sleep in an hour and rejuvenating lost aura to help with training her students. This makes her a very valuable asset to any team, on top of being a strong fighter. With these techniques alone, it's clear how powerful Bisky is, considering she uses manipulation with Cookie on herself or other people, as well as transmuting the products that help with whatever ails the person she focuses on. We could even argue that Cookie herself is a conjured or emitted being. But even without all that to support her, Bisky proved she had insane stamina and endurance by helping Gon and Killua for days on little or no sleep. Not to mention running 70 kilometers twice, with the second round being even quicker than the first. It seems like her masseuse is just a nice treat to have afterwards. But there's so much we don't know about Biscuit and her crazy techniques, so let's hope we get to see some more aboard the Black Whale. Do you think this ranking will change or be added to in the future? Let us know in the comments below. This is Jack Stansbury, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.